Hey guys, this is going to be another tutorial. This one is going to be about how to build your application, specifically for Android. So what you need to do in order to build, so I've got a pretty basic project here, just one scene. So you go to File, Build Settings, and when you open this up for the first time, you won't have any scenes in your build, so you'll have something that looks like this, and you need to have scenes in your build. These are the scenes that will actually be accessible inside the build, and if you have a scene that isn't in here, you will not be able to move to it in the build. So you can either add the open scene like this, or because you'll probably have multiple scenes, a better way is to maybe go into the scene folder and just drag in each scene. If you had more scenes, you would drag in each one at a time. The 0 index scene in the scene build will always be the scene that the application starts with, so make sure that your home or login or whatever scene is your 0 build scene. Okay, so we've got our scenes set up. Now I don't want to be on the PC, Mac, and Linux standalone platform because I'm trying to build for a mobile device. If you're trying to build for your computer, this is what you would use. You can see there's all these other platforms you can build for. I'm going to build for Android. So I will need to switch platform. Now, yours might say something like there is no Android module installed, and that's because you don't have the Android platform set up correctly. So I'll show you how you would set that up. So if I go back to Unity Hub and I go to Installs, and I go to the version of Unity I'm using, which is this one, and I go to the 3 dots and then Add Component. This is where you would check off these boxes if you hadn't already to download what you need for Android or iOS. I already have Android build support, so I don't need to do that, but another thing you might need is you might need Android Studio, because this is the SDK for Android. So if you install Android Studio and you add this component, that should be all that you need for Android. For iOS, to actually build it, you don't need to be on a Mac, but as soon as you want to run it on a device, you have to be on a Mac. You need to use Xcode, which is like a Mac program. So you can build it on Windows, but you won't be able to run it. So I'm gonna exit Unity Hub. Let's just assume that I just finished downloading that and I'm exiting Unity Hub. So now if I go back to my scene in my game, I can switch the platform now. It should show up. So I'm going to switch platform to Android. Okay, so there was a little compiling, but it was didn't take very long, and you don't really need to mess with any of these settings. You can look into them. I just would leave it as default because that's fine. And then you might try to build at this point, but there's actually a couple of things that you'd be missing if you tried to build at this point. So instead of doing that, let's go to player settings. And you'll see these are kind of the settings for your application. These 3 tabs, this is Android, this is like iOS, iPhone, iPod Touch, iPad, and this is just kind of a standalone. We're in Android, so we're on the Android settings, which is what we want to be on. You don't have to do this, but if you change the company name, then if you were later to go into the file system on the device, the file system is based on the company name. So just something, just to do, just good to do. Product name, that's, right now it's just by default the name of the project I created, but if I was going to release something, I'd probably want a different name than this, so, fun game or whatever, doesn't matter. And then if you want to build it with icons, this is where you would do that. If you just put in a texture, which I don't think I have any text, well, I could put in one of these. You'll see it kind of just fills in everything else for you. This texture isn't really a good icon, which is why you're seeing the warning, but it's fine. So you could just do this for each of these. And the difference between these three is you can see the API difference. So some icons, or if you have an API of 26 or greater, you'll have these adaptive icons. If you have an API of 25, you'll have these round icons. And if you have anything less than that, you'll have the legacy icons. You don't need this Android banner. You can have it if you want. I believe this banner is what shows up right when you start the application. It's kind of like a little information about your app, or about you, or stuff like that. Anyways, I'm just going to leave it one of these. If you want to make sure that your app can only be portrait or landscape, this is where you would do it. A lot of the time we only want portrait orientation, so you would set that here. You could look at some of these other settings. I'm not going to mess with them. You can have a splash image if you want. I'm not going to add one. Other settings is actually where most of the important stuff is, which is kind of ironic because it's called other settings. But the package name you're going to have to set. You can't leave it as this for Android. You have to set this. Usually you want it to be com dot just some kind of identifier. I usually do, since we're ETAD, I would do com.etad.cal82. You don't need to change the version and bundle version code, but if you're going through iterations, you probably want to, just so you can keep track of which version you're using. The minimum API level, it's what it sounds like. It's the minimum API that this will work for. And then the target, same thing. You don't need to change those really. Those are pretty good as is. This scripting runtime version, sometimes you need to change it back to 3.5. Not for anything we're doing with Android, but just something that might be useful. Install location, it should be automatic. I don't know why it's set to external. If it's set to external and there isn't an external, which for most Android devices there isn't, sometimes it just won't allow you to install it on the device, which is kind of weird. Let's see, besides this, these aren't important for us, and neither is XR settings. Okay, so that should be it for the player settings. So now all we would have to do is hit build, and it will take some time to compile, and it will generate an APK file for us. So I'm going to hit build, and you're going to see it's asking me for a place to store this build. Now if you're working in a project with other people, which you probably all are, you do not want to build this inside the project folder, because when you after you build it, if you then try to push to the repository, it will try to push the entire build because it's in the project folder. So instead you want to go outside the project folder. You can create a new folder if you want, and maybe just call this whatever, you know. You're going to name the file, it's going to be an APK type, and then you're going to build it. Okay, so the build finished. Here you can see I have this build in the folder. In order to show you guys what it looks like when I try to run it, I'm going to open up Android Studio and run the build in emulator. Let's see. Okay, I should already have a emulator installed, and this is fine. This looks good. Okay, so I'm going to close this and run the build on the emulator. Okay, so it's now launching my application. There it is. It worked. Yay! So this is, you know, exactly what we built in Unity. Here it is on the application. If I were to close the application and look for it, oops. Here's the fun game. The icon's really hard to see because I think I picked something white, but that's the icon I used. If you don't use an icon, it'll use the Unity icon by default. But that's pretty much it. I can relaunch the application. Here you'll see that Unity banner, and there's our application again. So that's pretty much all there is to build an application. It's not too bad, and it's a great way for you guys to test on your own devices if the resolution, the screen sizing, resizing is correct. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Let me know if you have any questions or if you have any other videos you would like me to make. Thanks.